If someone you loved collapsed right in front of you tonight, would you actually know what to do, or would you freeze? A lot of us secretly hope that the answer to that question never gets tested. My guest today is Rob Jones, co-founder of the Idiopath and a sudden cardiac arrest survivor whose life was saved by his wife starting CPR on their bedroom floor. Rob now trains others in hands-on life-saving skills and resilience. We're going to talk about what really happens in those first few minutes, how it feels afterwards, and why learning CPR is one of the most loving things you can do for the people around you. We're going to strip away the fear, the myths, and the I'll learn it one day, and talk about what really matters in those first few minutes. So, Rob, thank you so much for joining us today. How you doing? You have a good weekend?
Yes, good. Yes, good. Thanks. And you?
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much. So let's dive straight into things because your story sounds fascinating. So, Rob, can you take us back to that night, as far as obviously you can remember it, and what you've been told about what happened after you collapsed?
Yeah. So, my recollection is zero for the actual night itself. But obviously, I've got some good advice from others as to what went on. So, yeah, I've collapsed out of bed in the middle of the night. Ruby, my wife, thankfully, even though she's wearing an eye mask and earplugs, she's still heard me hit the floor, which is great, good sound. She's quite quickly realised that something isn't quite right. Initially, she thought I'd just tripped over or was sleepwalking or something like that. But no, it was a lot more serious than that. So she quite quickly recognised that I wasn't breathing and needed to act on that. And obviously 999 was her first call to make.
Obviously, she started the CPR process. From what you've been told, what was it like for your wife in those first few minutes, the thud in the night and having to go from partner to first responder?
Yeah, it's panic sets in, obviously. I think anyone in that moment, that's fairly natural that would happen. But instinct has kicked in to actually that she needs to do something here, and something obviously significant and important. So she'd not long done a first aid at work course, about a month or so before. So some of those things had stuck in her mind. I think when she checked for breathing, for example, couldn't see my chest rising and falling. So that was really when she realised I've actually got to do the thing that I learned not that long ago. And then, just dialed 999, spoke to the call handler, obviously, check in to see what obviously the situation was, and then her acting on that. So just getting straight into CPR and getting chest compression started as fast as she knew she could.
How has she kind of explained to you how she felt in that moment, or is it all just a blur for her as well a little bit?
There is an element of that. She just did what she felt natural to do in that moment, which is obviously to try and save my life. It's we've got a copy of the ambulance call, for example, so we've reheard exactly how she was in that moment, which for me is probably more difficult to hear because you don't tend to hear that panic in someone's voice, or certainly real world panic. So that was quite difficult for me to hear because you cannot practice what you feel like in that moment. So yeah, that was definitely an eye-opening moment for me to actually recognise how serious that situation was. We obviously knew how serious it was, but actually hearing what panic actually sounds like for real is quite something.
I suppose it must feel almost quite surreal because you were in the room. It was all about you, but obviously there was, no recollection or no awareness for yourself in that moment. So it must feel a little bit odd, kind of like the panic that you were causing her as well.
Yeah. I mean, I don't like being center of attention at the best of times. So in that moment, I've obviously that I was entirely the attention. And obviously Ruby did what she did. And obviously I'm extremely grateful for that.
So when do you think it really landed for you that I've had a cardiac arrest, my heart actually stopped, and what emotions came up for you once the dust had settled?
So it's probably about a week or so after I'd gone into hospital. So I was in a coma for a few days, and obviously can't remember any of that time. It was when I got moved onto a ward and sedation started to get wear off a little bit, and I started to kind of just question what was going on. I think it's unusual when you're obviously in a bit of a conscious state and you may hear what doctors and nurses are saying, but don't really process that. But then when your mind is a bit more with it, you've obviously been told some of this information before. So it's a bit of a confusing moment because some of it you kind of feel like you know already. But then when you actually reflect on it, you're like, no, this is very, very weird. For me, it was obviously I had wires connected everywhere in the hospital, machines beeping left, right, and center. I've not really had that much hospital sort of experience and time in my life, so didn't really know what I was doing there. You see everything all connected, and you can't even like get out of the bed or without asking for someone, or you can't, do something ordinarily, looking at your arms and seeing everything's just connected to everything. And that's probably the most confusing part because you don't really know why it's connected to everything. Obviously, you're there for monitoring purposes and making sure everything's all going the way they expect. But yeah, it's certainly a confusing moment to sort of come around and not be able to just walk over to somewhere or even speak in a normal way.
Was there concerns for your kind of well-being as far as obviously you said you were in a coma for a little while, and obviously we don't know full details. I'm sure you're maybe aware of the full ambulance call of how long how long was your wife doing CPR for?
18 minutes.
18 minutes. So essentially your brain was dead your heart wasn't working for 18 minutes and she was keeping your brain going for that time period and managed to keep that going.
And I think it's quite commonly known that survival rates aren't great from cardiac arrest, but B, brain damage can kick in after even a couple of minutes from your oxygen and blood not flowing. So it is a quite remarkable case there were, particularly when I was in the coma, there were quite significant concerns of brain damage, and I'd had a seizure when I was in resus, which I've never had before. I'm not epileptic or anything like that. So they were concerned by brain activity and pulled all the family members into a room and said, look, we really at this moment in time don't know whether A, he's going to come round, or B, if he does, is he going to be the same Rob as he was before? So yeah, there was definitely moments which again I can't remember, but the family certainly will probably live with them for much longer, where they've had to come to terms with the fact that I might not have come through it all. So yeah, definitely a tricky situation for all.
Yeah. Do you know how long it was before the sort of first responder or ambulance service arrived?
So, I mean, it was 3:00 in the morning. So, I mean, there's certainly no sort of complaints there from arrival times. But the ambulance came within about, I think it was about between 15 and 18 minutes. Obviously, Ruby had to carry on because there's a bit of a myth. There's a bit of a myth there that as soon as they arrive, that's it. But they've got to obviously get in the door. They've got to set up themselves. They've got to assess the situation and then effectively take over. So, between 15, 18 minutes they arrived, which at that time of the night is pretty incredible, really. So Ruby's carried on whilst they've got everything all set up, ready to take over.
So obviously this has inspired you. I'm sure it's what anybody who's been through an event like yourself would have found it some level of life changing in some ways. And I'm sure many people have maybe looked at their diet and exercise and stuff like that as far as why did that happen? What could I do differently? But you've kind of gone down a bit of a different path of going like, because of what your wife did, you've been inspired to try and then see who else you can help. So tell us a little bit about the kind of the journey that you've been on to create the Idiopath.
Yeah, so I recovered very, very well, as obviously you can tell now. But recovery was sort of physical first, and then sort of mental afterwards, I guess, in the way that it worked out. So I rushed to try and get back to old work, as I now call it. I've trained as an accountant, so that's my background, and that's what I was doing prior to what happened. Tried to sort of rush back to that, and that was my decision. I felt that was the right thing to do, just for my own well-being and recovery. Did all of that. Then because the recovery had gone so well, I was sort of asking cardiologists whether I could go and do things I used to love doing, football, for example, playing sort of three times a week, so really active. Um, it was only when they sort of said, yeah, that should be okay to go back and do, but take things steady. I went back to do it. Had a blinding gain, sort of one that the papers would have been proud of, but came home just buzzing really from it all. Adrenaline's obviously through the roof and all of that. And then that night, obviously I've got an ICD fitted just inside here, which restarts the heart should it stop.
Yep.
In the middle of the night, my heart's basically gone. No, that was too much, and it's basically stopped again, and the device has had to provide the shock. So that was really where I then I still tried to sort of carry on as normal and pretend that nothing had happened. But when the hospital called and said your device had to shock you last night, you need to come in, that was sort of what hit me harder the second time almost than the first time. And I think I then realized, well, what actually is helping me in life and what things aren't good for me, let's say. And some of the stresses I put on myself from the environment I was working in contributed to that. You need to do something different. It was, the recovery from that second time, which was more mental than physical, to be honest. That was when I just reevaluated it all and said, look, I'd really like to be talking about this more and raising awareness of what it is. I don't know anyone personally in my private sort of life that has experienced what I have. So even as an initial thing, it was to raise awareness amongst friends and family. But I think then it made me realize, well, actually, I want this to go much wider and make sort of empower others and show others that there's a skill here that you could learn that's I'm only here because of. And that's where it really sort of made me want to do something about that, really.
Yeah, and it kind of falls into, I have a bit of a mantra, which is GPS, which is everything that happens, gratitude, perspective, and service. And it's how can I take even the bad things and make something worthwhile from them. And it sounds like you've embodied that with this new journey that you're stepping into, of trying to raise this message. I say, if as I spoke about in the introduction, it's a case of, most cardiac arrests happen at home. I've been delivering first aid training for nearly 20 years now. And it's still perceived as kind of a workplace course that people, I have to do that as part of my job, not realizing actually this is so valuable that your employer is giving this to you, because actually you could save a life. You should be thanking them for teaching you how to do this, rather than complaining that you got to go on it. And that's a different mindset, isn't it? So a lot of people listening will think to themselves, I'm too scared to do CPR in case I make it worse. From your perspective, as someone who's obviously, his life has depended on it, what would you say to them?
I think if someone is in a position where they need CPR, their life can't get much worse. They are effectively dead in that moment. And there are fears of hurting the individual. There's fears of doing the right or wrong thing in that moment. But that person's in a pretty bad way, and without intervention is not going to survive, quite simply. So it's having enough confidence to do something. If it's the whole process of CPR, fantastic. If it's just calling 999, shouting for help, or doing something, then that is giving that person a better chance of survival. Like I say, doing nothing won't help that person at all. So it's just giving people, that confidence to step in and do something. With our motto is quite widely known now to say doing something is always better than doing nothing. Not just in this sense, but I think in any walk of life, really. But no, I think it really is more relevant to CPR more than anything else, because there are fears, and it is a traumatic event, and there's no taking away from that. But definitely having confidence to do something and not worrying about hurting the individual, because they're already pretty hurt, whether it might not look it, but they clearly are if their heart stopped. Just having enough about them to do something and to hopefully follow those steps of the chain of survival.
It sounds sometimes when I'm talking about it, it maybe come across as a little bit cold, a little bit clinical, and I kind of apologize for that at the time. But I think it's like, well, worried about hurting them. It's a case of, well, technically this person's dead right now. You can't really hurt somebody who's dead, and if you don't do anything, they stay that way. And it's shifting that mindset over to go, there is nothing worse, as you rightly said. But obviously that's one of the big worries that people have, but what are the most common worries that you've come across that people bring to your CPR sessions, and how do you help them move from I'm terrified to I can do this?
I think because we've got a real lived experience and we've actually been through it. Obviously, we deliver sessions, whether I do them, but quite often myself and Ruby both deliver a session, and we can overcome some of those classic questions that you might get and give it in a literal context. So, for example, I know there's people have issues with the mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, or rescue breaths as they're now called, and not wanting to do that on bystanders, and I sort of fully understand why people wouldn't. I personally didn't have rescue breaths performed by Ruby, and I'm her husband. She didn't want to do them on me, and wasn't advised to do so by call handlers either. So I'm here because of effective chest compression only CPR. So we encourage that participants in training will give rescue breaths a go and understand why that's important for various circumstances. But also because we've been through our own version of this and survival, it doesn't have to be exactly what the textbook says. All people are different. All environments that they're in, if this happens to them, are different. So yeah, again, the doing something versus doing nothing. We'd rather be explaining that, well, good quality chest compressions only might still save that person's life. They did for me. And yes, like I say, going through all of the process is very important, and giving people a go at doing that. But in that real heat of the moment, they might not physically or emotionally or literally be able to do it. So again, it's taking a little bit of the real world situation and adapting that in based on what we've experienced.
I remember when I don't know whether you remember these adverts, but the Vinnie Jones did some adverts with the British Heart Foundation for a while, and it caused some confusion in the first aid field because obviously he was saying you only kiss your mother and just press hard and fast on the chest and stuff like that. So within first aid training courses, we often found people go, oh, you don't have to do those breaths anymore, do you? And or Vinnie just said, you don't do those breaths anymore. And as you rightly said there, though, is sometimes this context. And the Vinnie Jones advert was appealing to the untrained, is people who, and because that's a barrier, some people don't feel comfortable. And under the guidance, it specifically states, if you are unwilling, unable, or untrained to give the rescue breaths, you don't have to do it. That doesn't mean you know, we just don't bother. And in children, for instance, it's more important. In wet CPR or drowning is more important. But I think it's that reducing that barriers, isn't it? Which is one of the things that you're trying to do, is just reduce those barriers to get people to do something rather than nothing. So for someone who's never done any training, can you explain in simple steps what hands-only CPR actually looks like in real life?
So we would, in the sessions that we provide, we'd obviously give a little bit of context into the situation and the sort of real living proof that this skill works. And the main thing for us is just encouraging to people to just give it a go. So you mentioned the sort of hard and fast compressions in the chest from previous adverts. It's actually getting people to see what that kind of looks and feels like. You will never ever be able to replicate the precise resemblance between a dummy and a human. But even the training equipment we use, they've got, you know, ways in which you can assist with the repetition and the depth of compression and that sort of thing. So yeah, we always will encourage you to just have a go with chest compressing, and get people in that mindset. Whether it is a song that people remember with a particular beat, "Staying Alive" as the classic one from years gone by, and there's a few more modern ones now, but that's still
what's your favorite on those? Because I've come across a fair few, and some
favorites probably a dubious one. There's I've heard Pink Pony Club is one of the latest ones that apparently is.
Okay.
But I mean, quite a lot of modern pop songs happen to be within that 100 to 120 beats per minute. So a lot of songs actually do work, and it. I think we talk about that, but we also then say, well, you're not going to get your iPhone out and play something as you're performing CPR, nor are you going to have lights on the shoulder of the person that indicate whether you're doing it at the right speed or that, so it's making us talk about it in a fun and engaging way. But obviously maintaining that connection to real life as well.
Yeah. I've come across lots of people absolutely love. So I'm still drawn towards Nelly the Elephant, and that's the one I was originally learned, and because it's 2 verses, exactly 30 beats, so I always quite like that one. But you need the rock version now because that's slightly faster. Darth Vader's March theme tune, that one works as well. Another one, Bites the Dust by Queen, is also one that works, but I don't suggest singing that one out loud. It's a little bit bit negative. But for a while, it was going around Baby Shark. And I don't know whether you remember the song Baby Shark. Oh, but if anybody started singing that would ruin my day. So that's banned from my classrooms.
When we're in schools and sort of when we're doing younger audiences, we've obviously got to find a song that everyone these days knows. So we've got to keep up to date with popular culture. That's fine.
It's great. Have you ever encountered an adult or child's behaviour that has felt difficult, overwhelming, or challenging? Have you sometimes felt at a loss of what to do, or know that you didn't handle it quite right? People are complex and unpredictable, and their behaviour can be like the weather. We've all made the mistake of looking out the window and feeling safe to wear shorts, but 5 minutes later wishing for an umbrella. But what if, like a weatherman, you understood how humidity, temperature and pressure all come together to cause the weather, allowing you to better prepare, predict and respond, and prevent ever having a picnic ruined by a thunderstorm ever again? My book, called Targeting the Positive with Behaviours that Challenge, helps you to become the weatherman of behaviour. It provides you with a toolkit to increase competency, confidence, resilience and empathy, so you feel more assured about how to respond to distressed or dysregulated behaviours in others, including those affected by trauma, mental health, neurodiversity, learning disabilities or dementia. Build better connections, achieve de-escalation and improve outcomes for yourself and those you engage with my celebrated 6-stage target model, a step-by-step process to reduce distress for everyone. Discover my empowering, person-centered guide in Targeting the Positive, written by me, Andy Baker, available from online bookstores worldwide. Find a link in the description and order today. And how do you find, so when you're working with learners and stuff, as you said, mannequins are as real as we want to get in some ways, but in no way near as real as, it isn't realistic in other ways. How have you found learners have kind of connected with that? Have you found that people ask you questions directly as well about, probably questions weird, like, how did it feel? But especially your wife, like, how does it feel to actually do it?
I think we encourage those questions, to be honest with you. We feel like we're not delivering the session in the way that we wanted. People don't. I think it's really important that people think about anything that they're thinking about in that moment. And yes, because of that relatability to what we've gone through, people do want to hear it from a real perspective sometimes. That definitely does help. And questions can come in all shapes and sizes as to like I say, because you're doing things in a controlled environment with dummies flat on a surface. You're not having to drag someone out of a bed onto the floor in a training exercise. So I think there are some questions that come with, if I come across this, what actually would we do? Yeah. And I think it's good to have those sort of real world examples of that, because like I say, I collapsed to the floor, sort of did a bit of the job for Ruby. If I'd just simply stopped in the bed, she'd have needed to drag me onto the floor and start that way. So again, that's where the sort of the hurting people connotation comes in as well, because they don't if you physically drag someone from a bed to a floor, it might be, different levels of height could hurt the person. But again, it's going back to what we said before about, removing that fear of hurting someone that's already pretty hurt.
Well, that's it. The risk of not doing something compared to whatever you got to do, isn't it? Yeah. I know that's obviously another one is bathrooms are obviously quite common because a lot of people, when they don't feel very well, go to the bathroom, and therefore, again, hard surfaces, lots of things to kind of fall on, but not easy to necessarily, somebody stuck between a toilet and a sink is certainly not your ideal that you might see in a training manual.
Yeah, this is it. Yeah, I think real world situations do need to be talked about and considered, whether you're by the side of a road or in the public, anywhere in the public, and just knowing where the safe places are, and to be able to do things in an appropriate way.
Yeah. Do you often get asked about the fear of being sued?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
come up a few times. Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we have something called a Samaritan's Act, which allows us to attempt to save a life if there's one's in danger.
Yeah.
And that's really where, again, uh, getting rid of that myth of well, hurting someone, but if they survive, and fear of repercussions thereafter. So that is quite a common one. So just trying to just nail that off in sessions is always good.
Yeah, I think it's quite good to know there's never been a successful suing of a first aider. It's never happened. And as you mentioned, like what's called Sarah's Law is there as far as the Hero Act is concerned to kind of protect people as well. So there is some protection around that. Now, so as I kind of mentioned in my introduction, most cardiac arrest in the UK happens at home, not in hospital. Why do you think CPR training is so important, specifically for parents, unpaid carers, teachers, anybody?
Yeah, I think sort of said it really. I mean, if the most common cases of it happen at home, if it's for children, and parents should know to act to be able to act on children. Children should know to be able to act on parents as best as they possibly can. Those that are really working with the public in some capacity, or in any capacity really, these things that are happening for people going into people's homes, that is the most common place for cardiac arrests to occur. So anyone who's visiting homes, anyone who's living in homes, family members within homes, it's vital that they are aware of what to do because of the statistics around where it happens. It's obviously healthcare professionals and those in hospitals and surgeries and things are required to know for the same reasons, but obviously for those that it happens in hospital, but definitely for those who have anyone living with them, it's vital for someone to know what that skill is, so that anyone can act in that moment.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, after the incident, have you had opportunities? Have you met and connected with other people who've been through a similar experience to you and your family?
Yeah, so we do quite a lot of I do quite a lot of volunteering and charitable work anyway, but we connected with the critical care charity to be able to go in and speak at their support groups. It's something that personally I didn't feel that I needed that support for that purpose. I don't remember critical care, so that's one of the reasons. But I think it's the aftermath of someone who's been through critical care that it can have impacted people in a lot of negative ways. I can't remember it and don't have any trauma associated with critical care. My side would have been sort of just simply the realization and recovery from cardiac arrest, which I really came to terms with later in sort of wards and that sort of thing. So yeah, we're doing sort of our bit to give back to those that have gone through something like this. I personally didn't have that and feel it's needed somewhere, but I know resources dictate that that's not particularly possible. But it's volunteering and going into the hospital units and actually speaking with people. It's massively important to those that have been through something. And like I say, I'm extremely fortunate to have A, survived, but B, survived being able to tell people about what my story really. Others aren't as fortunate. And I think those that aren't as fortunate may need more help, or certainly someone to talk to. So it's we want to reconnect with, or want to connect with people that have been through a similar event, share knowledge and experience of things, and work together on how we've tackled that.
Have you found that quite a few of the families that you've connected with, either they have gone out and learnt CPR themselves, or they've been seeking out or looked to kind of do more? Are they quite? Is there something that they seem to want to know?
Yeah, definitely. I think when there's that relatability and that connection, and if it's I've been approached by people who've had relatives that have had cardiac arrest, not survived, and then obviously felt within them that they should know about the skill. It wasn't necessarily that they were there at the time. It may have been that they'd all different circumstances and things, but really, if someone's experienced it or spoken with someone that's experienced it, it does hit home to the point where, well, yes, you should really know, and if you don't, that's okay, because everyone's got their own, everyone's got their own mind to make up, and that sort of thing. But we couldn't advocate it more, obviously, because of our experience. So I'd like to think anyone that's speaking with us that doesn't know soon will.
Yeah. Obviously, I don't know whether, have you connected with people who've obviously, where CPR has been maybe unsuccessful as well? Have you connected with people?
Yeah. A few people in sort of medical professions and firefighters and those that have come forward and sort of explained their stories to us. Some paramedics and those that actually have been on scenes, and more often than not, in say that it's in that sense of the word, it's that it has been unsuccessful more often than not. So it is important to recognize that the statistics of survival are low, and that with more people being aware, that should increase, and being respectful, obviously, of those that it hasn't worked for. It's important to see both sides, see that yes, we're the living proof that the skill works, but also there's someone could try to save someone's life and not, and that's obviously that's a different experience to our own, but one that certainly we'd sort of touch on and reflect.
Yeah, there's a friend of mine. I've known her through a professional capacity for a long time. She unfortunately lost her partner. Tried to do CPR, it was unsuccessful, but she still does her first aid training every 3 years. She finds it really hard, and she's had to do a lot of work. And we do the training separately for her. And like when she's doing the CPR, we do it personally. So if she feels overwhelmed, we can pause, we can stop, we can assess her privately and separately. But it's still something that she's driven to want to do. She still knows, I want to still know the skill, because I know I was unfortunate, but statistics are against me, and it's better to have something than not have it.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. We've had similar instances ourselves where we've done training with someone within the group has either had to do it or experienced it. And it will be triggering and traumatic for those individuals. So that's always why we'll sort of read the room and assess and tailor what we're offering to make sure it's effective.
Yeah. Now, obviously, you can only really speak from your personal experience in this, but what's it really like to live after a cardiac arrest? Kind of physically, mentally, emotionally. Maybe what's the thing that people don't see once you're fixed and home from the hospital? What have you kind of felt and encountered afterwards?
I mean, it's a very surreal feeling when you're walking down a street and no one knows what you've been through, sort of thing. And that's not for me to draw attention to myself. It's more just no one would be aware, because I physically don't look any different to how I did before. So that's what it is, an unseen sort of recovery process. Once you've obviously recovered from surgery and are sort of out moving and about, really, it's more living with thoughts and things happening. And obviously I've got a device inside me that's effectively would not electrocute, but it's going to restart my heart and provide a shock to me if it stops. I obviously, as soon as that got fitted, the next thing I was concerned about was, is it just going to happen anytime? When's it going to do it? Is it ever going to do it? So I think they're the things that you sort of have in the back of your mind on a daily basis from leaving hospital is, well, when is that going to actually have to do its job? Thankfully for me, it's only been once and I was asleep. But I know that for others who have got those devices, it's more frequent and brought on by something. So because of my, sort of that second experience I had, and actually realised, well, the device is there and it works, and I'm obviously extremely grateful for that. That also taught me, well, a reassurance that it's there and it works, but also it actually did need to do it, so it might actually do it again. So then you sort of live with it in a different way. Really, I think it is very much unseen. So yeah, if you're in a group full of people, or just people wouldn't know. And if no one knows about my life and that experience, they just would not. You wouldn't assume that anyone's gone through something like that. So surreal is probably the most appropriate word to use to how what it's like to actually live with that. Time has probably been the biggest healer, which I've sort of a lot of people explained would be. But there's still definite fragility there with living a normal life, because it just isn't the same as it was before. Even if it's just playing football, for example. I mean, it's playing sort of 3 times a week prior to what happened, to then doing everything I could to get back on a pitch and play, to then really be told you can't do that anymore. So that is quite difficult. But one of our sort of we talk quite a lot about resilience and people building resilience, and one of our key messages there is adapting to life's changes and challenges. And I don't think there's a better sort of analogy to use than what we've been through to do something different. Yeah, no one's saying I can't do anything. They're just saying I can't play football. But
Yeah.
could I walk up a mountain? Possibly.
Yeah.
Could I? Yeah, there's lots of things I can still do, and I should be and I am very grateful for that.
You kind of led into my next question really nicely there. So the Idiopath isn't just about CPR; it's also about resilience and coping with these things. So how did this trauma, you've kind of mentioned there already, but how did this trauma change the way you see stress, recovery, and being strong? And how do you bring that into your workshops?
So yeah, resilience has become, well, I mean, I'd call it a bit of a buzzword at the moment in life. We use our own lived experience to show what we interpret resilience to be, because it's not just about being strong or being courageous, or those things that typically people at the dictionary might say what resilience actually is.
Yeah.
So we've created a bit of a mindset on resilience, and created 5 like pillars of things to look out for, which is basically showing up whenever, showing emotion and having emotion, which should be deemed as being fine. Adapting, which I mentioned as obviously when life gets messy and going in a different direction. Protecting your energy, which is really important, particularly from a stress point of view, and surrounding yourself with good people, and talking always, and sharing thoughts and ideas. Creating good habits, that's the 4th one. So yeah, building momentum and positive change through the life choices that you make. And then alignment, which is just bringing it all together and sort of saying, I am the kind of person that can do this or can do that, and actually believing in what you're actually setting out to do. So yes, what we've been through is very traumatic, and obviously we've had to show a lot of resilience to get through that. But you don't have to have something so serious to have resilience and to show resilience and build it. It could be used. The tools we've created could be used in sort of everyday life, and we've got a workbook which people can download from website, which has got prompts and questions to get people thinking about those things, and to introduce these concepts to people, for hopefully to build sort of more resilience as life progresses for people.
Yeah, we'll make sure we get obviously a link to your website in the show notes and description, Rob. So that'd be great for people looking for that to reach out to. So for someone who's listening, who's thinking, I should book a CPR course, but I'm busy and it's scary. What's kind of maybe one story or moment from your sessions that you'd want them to hear?
I think our story just connects with people straight away, really, because I think there aren't many people teaching CPR or first aid that have CPR, probably more so than first aid, because first aid is obviously a bit more commonly associated, but not many people are teaching CPR that have had to do it on someone or have had it done on them. And that's where we can connect with the audience to say, we ask us the questions. We're okay to be asked those questions. Yes, we've had our own trauma and those, but we are okay talking about that. And I think us talking about that helps with that digestion of the information. Sharing some of the statistics, it then makes people think, well, you are very lucky to be here, sort of thing. So and Ruby having to do it for 18 minutes when people are practicing, and they typically only practice for sort of 30 seconds at a time. Obviously it's that connection with, she did it for that long. And it brings it more real. And I think there's not really a substitute for that sort of what we've been through, as opposed to just ticking a box, doing a course and coming out the other side of it, which we fully advocate, by the way. As I've mentioned before, it's first aid courses are incredibly vital for people to have those skills in all environments. And I wouldn't be here without Ruby having gone on a workplace first aid course. So what that work needs to continue. I think we're obviously homing in on the life-saving element, and showing that there's living proof that these skills do actually or can actually result in the person being as normal as it seems from the outset.
Yeah, and hopefully the way you're approaching it is appealing to the personal. Sometimes I think the first aid requirements for workplaces is maybe people ticking the box of financial and legal reasons rather than the moral reasons. And I think there's many workplaces that don't deem themselves to be big enough to require a first aider, but actually the benefits of, no matter the tiniest hairdresser, you could have a customer who falls down in that moment, or you could be the one that fall down while you're being the hairdresser and need somebody to know what to do.
That exact example, we have been in a barbershop and done exactly that with 3 staff that work there who don't fit the criteria of having to have a first aider, but they've got 10 people sitting in their one chair every day, and multiply that by a week and by a year and by however many years they've been doing it. There's a lot of people that are coming through their door and people are speaking with. And that's just one environment. Anyone, like I was mentioning, anyone that's working with the public and has got an element of responsibility for their welfare whenever they're in that space, I think it's a skill that they should know. And which is, again, why the first aid mandatory requirements are there for larger organizations. I think your smaller ones, just a gentle reminder of their responsibilities as well would be great for obviously what we're doing.
So if every listener of this podcast took just one action after hearing your story, something small but concrete, what would you most want that action to be?
Learn CPR, quite simply. We've got free resources to learn it online if it's not something in person that you have the time to do in that moment, as do the British Heart Foundation and the other amazing sort of charities that spread awareness. Learn the skill. It doesn't take very long to learn it, and hopefully it's a skill you'll never ever need to execute in the future. A lot of people say that about algebra at school. Like there's things that you learn at school which you're probably not going to use later in life. This is a skill that we want to be thought of in that same way, a life skill that anyone can learn very quickly and should really know.
Yeah, fantastic. So this is probably my last question, Rob. So for the people for the person listening who's thinking, I'm scared, I'd freeze if the worst happened, what would you say to them about why learning CPR now is an act of love for their future self and for the people that they care about?
So I'll refer back to that sort of doing something's better than doing nothing. The skill of learning CPR is, as I say, hopefully never needing to be used, but it gives you and the person that may need it a chance to maintain life and to save someone in that when they're in need the most. I think it's a skill that, as I said, I think everyone should know and be able to share that with others, so that if, and hopefully never, but if they ever do need to use it, then it could prolong or save someone's life that they love, like Ruby's had to do for me. And there'll be many sort of parents, and we've got children of our own. And when you've got things in your life that you want to live for, having a skill so simple as this is something that allows you to as we've experienced, continue living life. Whereas not many, well, no one should die at all, but no one should particularly die young. And I was 35 and had all of life ahead, really. And without that skill, that it would have ended there and then.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Rob. I will actually add one more question on there, as far as, because obviously, I think it's something that people perceive as a skill for adults, but I know obviously there is numerous organizations out there that now teach children, and children can learn. Do you teach children as well? Is that part of what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're working with schools, youth clubs, local community centres, and those that young sports clubs, all that kind of stuff. It's about really, as children from as young as 4, it's being advised should be aware of the CPR process. Obviously, someone who's age 4 is most likely to really be taught, well, how do I dial 999? What should I do? Whose neighbour should I knock on the door of, etc., etc. But as children get older and as they grow and as they, as they get more competent with these things, it's more skills can be developed. So if a 5-year-old learns, then a 6-year-old version of that same child will learn something slightly different, 7, 8, 9, 10, and keep going. And as they come into young adulthood, they should be then even more prepared for whether it is a workplace health and safety course that they do as an adult. But no, we think it's really important for children to be aware of it, to understand it, to not be scared by it, for it to again be that life skill that's just taught in school ordinarily, not a stop everything and be a scary exercise for kids to do. Obviously, having children of our own, we know how to tailor our sessions and make them age appropriate. And to be honest, it's when you see children having a go at it, and there's even the smile on kids' faces as they're doing it, it's something different. It can be a bit of fun, albeit it's not got a fun association to it. But for a child to do something a little bit different, and we've been in, we've done sessions with, for example, like a local kids basketball team, where they're in for their normal weekly training session to practice basketball. And the first 20 minutes of their session, they've just done something a little bit different, and they've taken really, really well to it. There's some remarkable children out there that there's stories of them saving adults and them saving others, and that doesn't come from nothing. That's because they're children are like sponges. They take that information on board, and that's again why we think it's really important for them to learn it at a young age.
Absolutely. Wouldn't it be amazing if as adults we already knew it, because it was like riding a bike?
Yeah. This is kind of how we really see it to be. It's we would just, we as mentioned, a life skill that hopefully you never need to use, but there's a load of them that we learn at school that we don't use in our adult lives. That I'm not saying stop learning about trigonometry. I'm saying just add into these schedules for people to learn these life-saving skills and other life skills. Really, it's not just this, but all sorts of things to aid children.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Rob. So if people are looking to reach out to you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so on social media, we're at the Idiopath. There's no one called what we're called. And then website, theideopath.com. And there's all contact information, as well as, I mentioned, downloadables and things on there for people to put up in their workplaces, and get some free guides on things, and just pick up the phone or send an email and start a conversation. That's all that we can really ask to help get this message out to more and more people.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Rob. So if Rob's story has nudged you from I'll do CPR training one day to I need to know this, make today the day you take a step. Book a course locally, talk to your school or workplace, or check out what Rob's doing at the Idiopath. And if you want more conversation to help carers, parents and teachers feel a bit more prepared for the hard stuff, follow the Able to Care podcast so you don't miss what's coming next.